We're down way at the bottom of Memches, the last paragraph on the page, starting with the word Vezeh. And this book for you guys, this is, your name is again, Jacob, yes. Jacob, this is, the book is called Orchot Tzaddikim, which is translated into English as The Way of the Righteous. It's part of the library of Musar classics. And it basically goes through attributes, one after the other, generally showing the strengths and the weaknesses, the strengths or the pitfalls of each of these different attributes. And some are generally more positive and others are generally more negative. But as a general rule of thumb, even those which are positive have negative manifestations, and vice versa. Those who are generally negative also have positive manifestations. And he's going through the attributes that we should be aware of what they are, how can we use them for good, and avoid, falling into the pitfall of using them for bad. The current attribute that he's working on is the attribute of love. And he talks about how people can fall into all types of pitfalls through the attribute of love because they love, let's say, money or honor or their children or their spouses or their family members, or they love life, or they love food and indulgences. And all of these things, while they could be positive, they also can lead a person to many negative types of behaviors and things like that as well, which I can't elaborate on, and we've been doing that in great detail until now. But after having gone through some of the negative manifestations of these forms of love, he's now addressing some of the more positive sides of it. And more specifically, at this point, addressing them like one by one, he's addressing the specific point about loving life or loving things of this worldly of a nature, where the negative side would be indulgence. And here he's stressing more the positive side, which is we should love life, not for life itself, but love life because of the opportunity that it affords us to attain the world to come. Or we should desire a long life, not just for the sake of having longevity in order to be able to indulge in this world even longer, but rather we should love life and the things that bring us life for the purpose of extending that life so that we can do more Torah and mitzvos. And most specifically, he was talking recently about, for example, eating. Eating should be done quantitatively and qualitatively in a way which is going to preserve your life for the purpose of having a better quality spiritual life. And therefore, you're not going to be eating sweet things or tasteful things if they're not healthy, and you will be willing to eat things which are not particularly palatable if they are healthy. And even if it is healthy, you'll eat quantities which are healthy and avoid eating quantities which are not healthy. And the same thing applies with all types of other things having to do with maintaining our bodily functions, like exercise and other types of things. And that's basically what we left off with yesterday. So let's see how he continues with this at the bottom of that page, Memches. It's good for a person to refrain, to minimize the amount of dainties and sweet foods that he eats. And he should only eat like one type of a dessert when he's eating, and while he's eating. And it should be enough for you to minimize as much as possible. So a lot of, I mentioned very much at the end of the class yesterday, that a lot of what he's going to be saying here is based on Talmudic teachings about health and healthy living, and particularly diet and exercise, and most specifically, his wording is very reminiscent of the language of the Rambam, where the Rambam writes in the section of Hilchos Deos where he talks about healthy living. And the Rambam predated the author of this book, and a lot of what he says is based on that. The top of Memtes, V'hitkaven bo lahagia halechem el bitnecha v'lo lis'aneg. And when he says lifton here, actually, it might not be dessert. It's probably actually dealing more with the things that you use, the condiments, I think that's the word, the condiments that you use to kind of open your appetite or to make the bread more palatable. People don't just eat bread. They dip it in hummus, or they dip it in salads and things like this. So he says a person shouldn't eat too much of these other types of things, only what you need to kind of aid digestion and maybe to give you a well-balanced diet, but not put too much effort on these things. His intention, therefore, should be to enable the bread, which is the staff of life, to be able to reach his stomach. V'lo lisaneg, but not just to have all of these salads for the, because he wants to enjoy as an Epicurean all of the different tastes of all of these different types of salads and dressings and things like this. V'hergel nafshecha k'tzas ho'itim mebli liftan k'dei lahanhig tiv'ocha, and you should actually accustom yourself sometimes to not have any of these accompanying dishes at all. Ad sheyakel alecha be'es himanoo, so that it will actually be easier for you to refrain from them. Because if sometimes you're used to not having them at all, you'll suffice having a little when you do have. V'im tuchal, if you can, tazo v'liftan asher yeshbo yegia v'toyrach. You should avoid eating these types of, for lack of a better word, salads and accompaniments and so forth and so on, which require great effort. I'm not sure at this point whether it means effort in preparing them or effort in eating them. V'sim achiloscha b'yom kala me'achiloscha b'layla. And you should make the food that you eat during the day lighter than that which is at night. The reason of this is because, of course, during the day we're active, and if you eat heavily, it's going to prevent you from being active and make you lethargic. Therefore, eat more heavily at night. But he doesn't really mean at night, because their day was really not night. Their day was morning, afternoon, and evening. Night was the time to go to sleep. When God turns the lights out, the kids go to bed. So he's not talking about eating light during the day and then having a heavy meal by night, which would seem to contradict what we do nowadays, which is to avoid having heavy meals at night because it affects your sleep. The Rambam says explicitly, it's not good to have a heavy meal at night before you go to bed because it's going to affect your sleep. Your body's busy digesting food and it's not going to be able to rest properly during sleep. So what he means here is you should have lighter meals during the day, meaning the morning and the afternoon, and have a more significant meal later on in the day, late afternoon, early evening, so that it's digested properly by the time you go to bed, which would be an hour or at most 2 hours after sunset. Then sleep properly, dream properly, get up midnight, learn through the rest of the night, and then get ready to daven at sunrise the next morning.
So what time do people go to sleep in those days? If they woke up at midnight?
It would vary. Since it was very much regulated by the sun, it varied by the seasons. Okay. But presumably they went to sleep. In the winter, they went to sleep, for a longer period of time after sunset than in the summer. But people, let's say, would go to sleep on the average around 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and wait 12, 1, 2. The Ben Ish Chai says that every 1 hour of sleep that a person has before midnight is equal to 2 hours after. So according to this, if your body is set up according to the natural kind of running of things, and you sleep at the right time and have a nice peaceful sleep, 4 hours that you can get between 8 and 12, or 9 and 1, is worth 8 hours between 12 and 8. Yeah. So
has that been like if I go to sleep every day at 9 o'clock, I can wake up at 1 and go through the whole day like that?
It's possible, but it's very difficult nowadays because of the way the world is set up, that since the whole world is awake at those times, even if you're asleep, number one, there are practical distractions, like people playing music, people walking around the corridors, people riding cars and bumping horns and so forth in the streets. And aside from all of that, there's a whole metaphysical influence of what happens in the world. When there's a lot of noise, the noise of activity in the world, energy affects everything. So even if a person's sleeping, his mind and the soul as it departs from the body through sleep is not going to go through the type of tranquil process that it should go through. So it's hard to kind of tune into this type of thing. However, if you did live in a small village which was further removed from a metropolitan city, and things really did get quiet and serene early on, and you were kind of in tune with that cycle of living, then I think you would be able to get more out of that. Yeah. Okay. But phones ring and sirens blast, and even if you don't wake up, but it's that stimulus is coming into your ears when you sleep. So that in those times, the world was a much quieter, cleaner place, and people's biological clocks were much more in tune with the way God runs the world. And by and large, unless there were very difficult times of famine and war and so forth and so on, people led a more tranquil lifestyle. That is the ideal according to Jewish sources, and some people try and regain that ideal nowadays, although it's very hard to do that and maintain it and really get the most out of it. Yeah. But at least a person, I'm talking, last night I went to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up at 8 o'clock this morning, so I got 3 hours of sleep. And many nights I go to sleep at 2, 3 o'clock, and maybe get 3 or 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I go to sleep way too late, and it's not so easy to get up. And then when you get up, there are all kinds of responsibilities at home with the wife and the children and school, and so it's a kind of a hectic lifestyle. I definitely feel like I'm worn thin. I'm like really, particularly today, and very thin. But, so I'm not one to talk, but that's the way it should be. Really, it should be that one goes to sleep early and wakes up early. And there are a lot of many different sources that talk about this and what it means on a practical, technical, pragmatic level, and what it means on more of a metaphysical, spiritual level. And there's so much I could talk about these things, for hours, but I think it would go beyond the scope of what we're doing here. But a lot of it is also connected with the relationship that one is encouraged to have with one's wife, and that should also take place later on in the night, more in the early morning, and that connects to a lot of the metaphysical things that are taking place in the world throughout as the night progresses. The beginning of the night is associated with what we call din, or judgment. As the night passes and moves after midnight towards the morning, we move more into the character of chesed, and the active intimacy between the husband and wife should be an act of chesed and done specifically at that time. There's a lot there. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to speak about it more at another time, but since we're having just a short class today, let's see how much of this paragraph we can get through. I believe we're on the fourth line down. Meaning your eating during the day should be less than that in the evening. A person should eat twice a day. Not like we ate 3 times a day, but twice a day. So that your body should be light and agile during the day. So many people miss the midday classes or have these midday crises because they hit like this wall, which is really the result of lunch.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
What's that?
That's it right there.
Yeah. Why? Because the body has to deal with having been active in the morning, and you don't know how well the person slept or not. But now you put a big load on the stomach in order to digest this big meal that we have for lunch, and all of that blood, that life-invigorating fluid, is concentrated on your stomach and away from your head until you get drowsy and not off. So yeah, but if you don't eat, it sounds counterintuitive. You think, well, if you don't eat, you're gonna have energy, but it's not like that. If you don't eat, you have plenty of energy. All you need.
Just a few pieces of bread.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, for example, I mean, I don't really speak about myself that often, but since I had mentioned that, I had, I was talking about, going on not too much sleep. I tend not to eat very much either. And this morning, for example, I mean, today all I've had was maybe 2 rice patties and half an apple. But I feel energetic, Baruch Hashem, I have energy. So a lot of it is mental. And the truth is, it's like traveling light. If you eat a lot, then you travel that weight with you throughout the day. But if you eat a little bit, it's really all you need. It's really all you need. Like you said, just a slice of bread. Of course, it depends on your age.
Yeah.
It depends on your age and your physiology and things like that. When I was younger, of course, I ate more. My lifestyle was different. As you get older, you see that you don't need to eat as much. So why do so? You can get by on a little, and your energy level is just as much, if not more, than if you eat a lot.
What about drinking water?
That's important, very important. Yeah.
At least drink a lot of water.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Rambam already writes, I don't know whether he'll address this here or not, because the Rambam goes into great detail about eating healthily and so forth and so on. Things that we know today, that a person shouldn't a person shouldn't drink before or during a meal, and even after the meal only a little bit, because of course that dilutes the digestive juices, which would impede the proper digestion. He says, however, a person should drink wine with the meal.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, wine, because wine helps with the digestion, I suppose. It's robust, and it's probably has, the alcoholic or the acidic content, helps break down the foods and aids in digestion. And in those times, people, wine was a much more common staple in people's diets, because they might not have had water, or the water might always have been potable, I think the word is, drinkable. But wine could be made and preserved and kept for a long time. If it's made properly, the longer it's kept, the better it is. People had wine. But if it's, once it's not really too significantly before, or if at least it's significantly after the meal, it's good to have plenty of fluids, liquids, water. ומתוך כך, יקלו עליך ענייני תורתך. Then through minimizing what you eat, like I say, traveling light throughout your day, you're actually going to make the experience of Torah much lighter, meaning much easier. Visnaheg lishtos maim. He says, exactly your point. A person should be regular in drinking water. Elimken tiye kavanosecha b'shasiyas hayain l'soeles gufecha o l'ha'avir hadaga. I guess he's talking about water as opposed to wine, unless he says your intention in drinking the wine is that it should somehow be beneficial for your body. And nowadays doctors do say a glass of wine a day is good for the heart. Or l'ha'avir hadaga, or if a person's upset or preoccupied and distracted, so maybe he does need, maybe having a glass of wine would help calm him down, relax him, get his worries off his mind, and so forth and so on. So, that might also be an intention to have wine. Vizar me'od miharabos mimenu, but be very careful not to have too much wine. Ki hu meshakir u'marchik l'Torah, because it causes the person to become drunk and distances himself from the Torah. And this is the general rule of thumb you should always have. A person should never eat too full or drink too full. Rather, only eat and drink the quantity that he needs to be healthy. And we know, the Rambam says, again, I don't know if he's going to elaborate here, that a person should eat till he feels the sensation of being 2/3 full. And nowadays we know that the satiation...
It's sometimes hard, though, to be in connection with your body like that,
It's hard to, but you can get used to it.
How do you tell when you're...
You can get used to it.
2/3 full.
If you try it...
You're full, obviously.
Yes, you can try it, over a week, and you'll start to feel, you sometimes eat a little bit less than you think you would want. Sometimes eat as much as you think you want. Sometimes eat a little more than you think you want. But medicine now tells us that the satiation mechanism is triggered only about 15 minutes after you have reached that point with the actual food. So that if you feel 2/3 full, right, 15 minutes from now, you're actually going to feel full. And if, based on how you feel now, being 2/3 full, you eat more because you want to feel full, 15 minutes afterwards, you're going to feel bloated. And that's why people hit those walls. So it's always better to err on eating less than eating more. Yes, and you can certainly get by with less. And you probably have seen that when you wanted to have more and you didn't, or there wasn't, you couldn't, and you thought, wow, how am I going to get through the rest of the day? You find after half an hour, you're already on with your day, and you don't think about it. And therefore, it's generally true that even if while you're eating you don't feel full, you've actually had enough. and you've had probably what would be a healthier amount if you stop eating and let that satiety mechanism kick in, so that in a quarter hour from now you'll feel that the food you ate is exactly the maximum that you should eat, and eating more would be harmful. V'yimshoch yadav min hamoisar. A person should lift his hand from excess. And it's also, if a person is interested in doing this and working on it, I mean, there are different practical techniques, but if where you're eating, you're able to have seconds, you might decide, I'm going to take half of what I think I want. Rather than filling up the plate with everything I think I'd want, I'm going to take half of that. And if I want more, I'll take seconds. Now, by the time you finish that first amount, you might feel like, you know what, I don't really need the seconds. Or if you decide to take the seconds, you might feel like you'll take really half of a portion, which would be only another quarter, so that you actually need 3/4 of what you would have had if you piled it all into the plate when you first approached the food and you came to it very hungry, and so forth and so on. So these are good ways to start this would be one of many kind of practical techniques you could use to start getting in touch with your body and how much you really need and how much an excess should be avoided. All right. Yeah, I think that I really must end here, unfortunately. But Bezrat Hashem will continue on Sunday.